The Stanley Cup Playoffs do not sleep, and neither do we. What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Hockey News Playoff Frenzy Live, brought to you by Sticks.com. I am your host, Emma Lingen. I'm joined by Katie Gauze and Mike Agello, and we are coming at you live to talk about Round 2, Game 3 between the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Florida Panthers. And what a game it was. The Leafs pulled a Leafs and they blew a 3-1 lead. They allowed Florida to score 3 unanswered goals in the second period. Toronto ties it in the third with a friendly bounce off of Seth Jones. And then, of course, they head to OT for the fourth time this postseason, and none other than Brad Marchand, Florida Panther Brad Marchand, which still sounds weird to say, ends up winning it for the Panthers in OT. And we are going to get into all of that and more. But first, wherever you are watching us on YouTube, X, Instagram, Facebook, all the places, we encourage you to send us your questions, your thoughts, your comments, your hopes and dreams about this game, this series, or anything about the playoffs. We would love to hear from you and to talk some hockey with you. We've also got Game 2 going on between the Dallas Stars and the Winnipeg Jets right now. The Jets took an early 2-0 lead, so we will be sure to keep you updated on that one. But before we do any of that, do want to remind you that we are brought to you by Sticks.com. Why break the bank on sticks when you can get pro level composite sticks without the pro price tag at Sticks.com? That's STIX.com. Head over now and gear up. All right, Mike, I know you were just chomping at the bit over there. So we know that this was a game, last night we were all here. We were talking about Washington and Carolina being a little bit of a snooze fest. Don't think we really had that with this game, but just kind of I'll start with you, Mike. What are kind of your overall thoughts on this one? Do you think that the Leafs showed enough urgency? Was it, what are, just give me your raw reaction to this one?
Well, they reversed what they did in Game 2, because I thought they came out a little dozy in the first period of Game 2. Tonight they came out with that goal. I think it was 23 seconds into the first period where Nye scored, and then follow that up with the Tavares goal. And I'm like, okay, here we go. This is not what I thought. They were going to come out and Florida was going to have their hair on fire, and they did. They compiled 66 hits in the game, but the momentum was clearly in Toronto's favor. And then the goal that I think changed it was the Barkov goal, which was the Morgan Riley goal, because it deflected off of him.
Right.
And this is like a World Cup soccer match where he had so many own goals. I mean, but the difference is when I think it was Colombia and the U.S. back in the day, then the Colombian player scored an own goal, and when he landed in Bogota, he was assassinated. Don't think that's going to happen in this series, but I think that there was some questionable effort by the Toronto Maple Leafs, especially in the second period, where, as you said, they had a 3-1 lead, and that means Florida had them in the perfect place, because as soon as there was a little bit of complacency there, let's just hold on to the lead. That's all that Florida needed to turn things around.
Well, and you mentioned Morgan Riley. I mean, it's ironic too, because the one goal that he was credited with actually bounced in off of Seth Jones. And so it's really just Morgan Riley giveth, Morgan Riley taketh away, I guess. But he has probably overall had a night to forget. Katie, what are your thoughts overall on the game and on Riley in particular?
Yeah, well, certainly, I think, again, Riley is one of the guys on Toronto that is looked upon, maybe not necessarily listed as a core four, but he's certainly right in that mix. So someone that needs to step up, and in these types of games, every single night, you're going to need someone different to be the hero. But I think from a Florida standpoint, right, I mean, coming home, trailing the series 2-0, first game in Sunrise, this was a must-win game. And I think as the game went on, you started to see the desperation kicking up more for Florida. Toronto outshot them in that first period 12-10, but then Florida outshot the Leafs every single period following that. And, I don't know about you guys. I felt like there was an element of physicality to this game, but the record shows 112 hits were given out between Florida and Toronto. I don't know if it personally felt that physical. So whoever was responsible for tracking the hits tonight in Sunrise was certainly being generous. But again, that being said, it definitely it had an element of Florida knowing that this was a desperate game. Like you mentioned, Emma, with the tip-in goals. I mean, it was one of those nights where it felt like really you just need to keep throwing pucks on net because it was. I mean, that's essentially what we saw with the Marchand OT winner, right? I mean, again, shot from out far, hit at least one thing. I don't know who it was. I don't know if it was a Panther. I don't know if it was a Leaf, but there were bodies that were in front. Something was hit. The puck finds its way into the back of the net, and that really was kind of the difference maker in tonight's game for both sides. It really did benefit both teams. It was just a matter of who's going to cash in last in terms of the OT that we saw. It almost had an element of feeling like this was going to go to triple overtime. So there's a part of me that, from a broadcasting standpoint here for us to get on the show, was a little bit relieved that the game didn't go as far as it could have because it felt very evenly matched. The teams were trading chances, I felt, throughout that overtime. It really did feel like someone was going to get a lucky bounce. It ends up being Florida. Like I mentioned, of course, they're desperate. So if nothing else, it certainly makes the series a little more interesting. 2-1 is very different than 3-0.
That it is. And Katie, you mentioned the desperation level for Florida. Obviously, with this being a must-win game, they're coming in at home down 2-0 in the series.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but it kind of seemed to me in the first period when they came out. I mean, obviously, we mentioned Toronto takes that early lead, score 23 seconds into the game, and then they score another goal not long after. So Florida's down 2-0 early. So, of course, the score sheet says they're not playing with desperation, but just overall, it kind of seemed like the effort wasn't there. And one guy in particular that I want to focus on for the Panthers is Sergei Bobrovsky, because he really needed a strong performance in net tonight. And it was not looking good for him in that first period. I mean, he came into this game with an .876 save percentage in the playoffs. Mind you, for his career, he's got a .904 save percentage in the playoffs. So this has been a down year for him. I know with Florida, they have so much physicality, so many weapons. We don't often talk about goaltending with them. But I'm curious what your thoughts are. I'll start with you, Mike, on how important is Bobrovsky's success and level of play going to be for Florida in this series?
I think it's vital. Now it's 13 goals in 3 games. He's not the goalie Bob of the last 2 years, and maybe that's the case. I mean, the Leafs got their first playoff victory in 20 years. I think it was 19 years actually, when they beat Tampa Bay. After Tampa Bay had gone to, 3 consecutive Stanley Cup Finals. They won 2, then they lost 1. They played a lot of extra games, and this Florida Panthers team has played a lot of extra games. And Bob has been in goal for most of them. He is 37 years old. So, and they did trade Spencer Knight at the deadline, so he probably played the majority of the games down the stretch because a Vitek Vanacek game was pretty much a loss. Yeah. So. And he really and they benefited from the fact that Vasilevsky was playing like Jonas Johansson, and so I mean, he hasn't really played well in this playoffs. Now Toronto can't rely on that. They have to assume this is classic Bob, and and they have to keep pressing. The guy who I think, and of course I'll say this in next game he'll score 4 goals. Matthew Tkachuk has not been Matthew Tkachuk. He's been not going on there. The majority of what he's done is try to injure or goad people into, he tried to slew foot Mitch Marner at the end of game 1. He went knee to knee with Riley at the end of the second period in game 1. Tonight, he's rabbit punching Simone Benoit in a scrum, and Benoit looks at him. He's like smiling. He's like, "Why should I go with you?" It's like, we know you're hurt, but he could still he could still score a goal at the most important time, and he's still a player that you should be scared of.
Yeah, and I mean, I think with Bobrovsky too, right? Like, same with the Panthers in general. One of the knocks, not necessarily a knock, but one of the genuine concerns that we all had about them, and maybe a reason why people didn't give them as much credit heading into this postseason, was the amount of hockey that they've played. And no one's played more than a goaltender, right? They carry so much weight on their shoulders year in and year out. And certainly Bobrovsky has had to do a lot of that heavy lifting. And when they won the cup last year, he was a huge part of it. So I think the same goes for this season. If he isn't able to necessarily rise to the same level as last year, it's very reasonable to assume that they will struggle to have as much success and to make it as far as they had in previous seasons. That being said, if you're not giving up fully egregious goals as a goalie and you have a good offensive team in front of you, if you have that skill that we know Florida's got depth, we know what they're capable of. It's also reasonable to assume that Sergei Bobrovsky doesn't have to be perfect. He just needs to make as many of the good saves that they are going to count on him for. And with tonight's score being 5-4 the way that it was, whatever you want to argue in terms of performance, the shots weren't crazy different. So I'd say Bob did enough. And sometimes there are going to be games, especially in the playoffs, where that's all you need from your goaltender is just do enough, get us the saves that we need, and we'll do the rest. And tonight was kind of the case for Florida.
It was. If you are just joining us again, this is the Hockey News Playoff Frenzy Live, brought to you by Sticks.com. Emma Lingen, Katie Gauze, Micah Jello here talking about the Maple Leafs and the Florida Panthers, a 5-4 overtime win for Florida. And we've been talking about Florida a little bit. Want to keep it there for a second. Another personnel decision that I thought was very interesting for the Florida Panthers. Paul Maurice decided to just full send and swap out not just one or two guys, but his entire fourth line. So he replaced Boqvist, Samoskevich, and Sturm with Gadjevich, Greer, and Nosek. Obviously ends up paying off. Nosek gets the go-ahead goal for Florida in the second period. But I mean, I feel like, yes, it's the fourth line, and Florida has kind of been known for having these sort of interchangeable depth players, and that's been part of their success in the last couple years. But I mean, how bold of a move is this, do you think, Mike, by Paul Maurice to switch out an entire line? And, is this an example of maybe, obviously Craig Berube and Paul Maurice, both very experienced, tenured coaches, but I mean, is this maybe a little bit of, chess by Paul Maurice in a game of checkers, do you think?
I think it's the fact that Paul Maurice has the last line change, and that if he's playing Gadjevich, who they've awarded the goal to him. Nosek was the one who was given credit, and up until a few minutes ago, they just changed it to Gadjevich. Okay. He's a limited player. He's a physical fourth liner. He's an energy guy, but if you don't have the last change, you get caught out there. The limited minutes for him, limited minutes for Greer. Nosek is a little more capable in terms of playing more minutes, and he played almost 12. So I think that was the motivation. And, you've lost 2 games. Again, you have to sort of look busy. You have to sort of shake things up, even if you're really not shaking things up. It comes down to that core group, that has won a Stanley Cup. And that's the group that won them the game, along with the King Rat, Brad Marchand, but Toronto is probably calling the resident Orkin man in Sunrise to exterminate him.
Yeah, I mean, I think if nothing else, it speaks to, again, like the confidence that Florida has in their depth, the ability to plug and play with guys, knowing that whoever comes in their lineup has a very strong grasp of exactly what their role is, exactly what they're expected to do. Truthfully, I think it was a storyline throughout tonight's game, and it's been interesting to watch, but you've got to give a lot of credit to the Panthers' third line of Louis Durainen, Lundell, and Marchand, of the shutdown role that they've been relied upon to play against Austin Matthews. So again, like these are players who haven't truthfully had that much time together, right? Obviously, Marchand coming in at the deadline, but not playing until towards the end of the season because of injury. So they've certainly found something, but their ability to go out there against one of the greatest goal scorers in the game right now, Austin Matthews, to, effectively eliminate him a little bit better than I think maybe people expected. It's been interesting to watch, but this is just a testament to Florida's identity. I think they are a team that has confidence with whoever they're rolling out, that they are going to know exactly what their role is. They have a good identity and they play that way every night. It's just a matter of, is it enough? And are they contributing? Are they finding ways to be offensive? Because I think some nights they get so caught up in the identity and the physicality, they aren't necessarily producing. But tonight we saw a little bit of both.
We did. And you bring up Austin Matthews, which is a fantastic segue to my next question for both of you, which is, where has Austin Matthews been? He, especially I think in this game, sort of pivotal moment, you're going into the third period, of course, after the Leafs had blown that 3-1 lead. They're under a ton of pressure now. They're going into the third period to prove that they are not who everyone thinks that they are, and that they are capable of using their star power, their firepower, and coming out and really doing some damage here in the third. And I think I'm not the only one who was thinking, you know what, this would be a great time for Austin Matthews to show up and do something. He has really been very quiet, not just this series, but in these playoffs. So I think, Katie, you mentioned that Florida has done a good job at shutting him down, with their defense. But I just kind of wonder, I mean, Mike, you and I have talked about this on the wraparound all season, that it's very clear that Matthews is not 100% health wise. He had sort of this mystery injury that sent him on a trip to Germany in the middle of the season, came back. It still just doesn't seem like he's the Austin Matthews that we know. And I think that no one really expected him to come back and be the 60 goal scorer again. But I mean, this is just seems like such a drop off. So Mike, in your opinion, do you think that Matthews has another level that he can unlock in these playoffs for Toronto? And if he doesn't, whether it's health related or whatever, I mean, if he doesn't, can the Leafs still pull off a series win without him?
That's to be determined, because yes, he's not the 69 goal Matthews. He scored 33 this year. He missed a month during the regular season. As you mentioned, he went to Germany. His shot is not the shot that we've seen from Austin Matthews. I've seen for most of the playoffs, whenever he's had an open opportunity, he has shot high. His aim is there's just something off. Now, he's been good in the face-off circle. He's playing excellent defensively. He had 2 assists in the game. He's just not the trigger man that he has been in the past. And the question is, can they win without? I mean, Matthew Nyes has sort of picked up the goal-scoring mantle from Austin Matthews on that line. But can they keep relying on Nyes and Marner to pick up the goal scoring slack on that line? I don't know. And he's improved remarkably defensively, and he's a good faceoff guy, but they need him to score. And I just don't think he's going to. So we'll see how far they can get.
Yeah, I mean, and you look at the scoring stats for the playoffs, or you look at the points totals, right? He's the third on the Maple Leafs right now in terms of points. But, there's always a level of concern when, a guy like Cam Fowler, for example, who only played 7 games, has more points than Austin Matthews as a defenseman on a team that's now been eliminated from the playoffs, right? I guess the positive spin to take on it is that the Leafs have had other guys stepping up. Like you mentioned, Michael Nyes is one of them. But I mean, the performance that we've seen from Nylander, the performance that we've seen, Mitch Marner's got 10 points, 8 of those assists. So he may not be scoring the goals, but he's setting up a lot of plays. So again, I think the the jarring part of watching Matthews plays is just the expectation of his goal scoring ability. And when you're not seeing that, it's kind of like a gut reaction to immediately assume he isn't playing well. But like you mentioned, there are so many other elements of his game right now that he is doing well, and they are still contributing to these Leafs wins. It's just not what you expect from him. And I do think that if Toronto is going to make a full-on run, not just win this series, but be a true contender and make it all the way to the Cup final, you're going to need him to find a way to score a little bit more than he has been. And I'm not saying that necessarily he's going to completely have a breakout moment if he's limited right now due to an underlying injury. There really is only so much that you can expect from him. But at the end of the day, he's a guy that you rely on for goals. And if you want to win the Cup, you need that guy to be scoring.
Yeah, it does seem like, I mean, to his credit, he is quite literally doing what he can at this point with whatever physical limitations he may or may not have. Again, Hockey News Playoff Frenzy Live. If you are just joining us now, Emma Lingen, Katie Gauze, Mike Agello, we are talking about the Florida Panthers overtime win over the Maple Leafs. And want to wrap up our discussion about this game in a minute. First, do want to check in over on the other game that is going on right now. We've got game 2 between the Dallas Stars and the Winnipeg Jets. Winnipeg has now taken a 3-0 lead. 3-0 lead. That is an entire Mikko Rantanen hat trick's worth of goals that they
Which is possible.
You stole my line, Emma. You stole my line, damn it.
Yeah, I was saying before, I was like, well, that's 2-0. They just need a hat trick from Rantanen and then easy. They're Dallas wins
the whole thing.
Now they need Mikko Rantanen hat trick and a little help, a little duct tape and a dream over here. So I think that we'll see what's going to come of that. It's not looking great for Dallas right now, but we have seen them come back in dramatic fashion already in these playoffs. So do not count them out. We will get back to that series here in a second. But again, wrapping up our discussion about the Maple Leafs and the Panthers. Obviously, coming into this game, Panthers were down 2-0 in the series. It was clearly a must win. They got the win. It maybe wasn't the prettiest and it wasn't the most commanding victory that they could have gotten, but they got it done. Mike, how much do you think does this win for Florida, if at all, change the trajectory or the momentum of this series? Do you think that it has really kind of swung back in Florida's direction, or is it still mostly favoring the Leafs right now?
It favors them only in the fact that they're up 2-1. We know that this is a team that up until the last round, when they were up 3-0 against an inexperienced Ottawa team, and then basically put everybody in Maple Leaf Square in a straitjacket because that they blew 2 games to the Senators and then finally won in 6 games. They held serve. They won their first 2 games at Scotiabank Arena, and those were both 1-goal victories. Now, they came within a whisker, cat's whisker, or whatever whisker, dog's whisker, of going up 3-0 and then making Leaf fans worry if they were going to blow a 3-0 lead. Until this team gets the 4th victory in a series, the people in the GTA need the nitroglycerin pills at the nearest ER. This team stresses them out. Now, they're better. This is a better version of the Leafs than most previous versions. But with Stolarz going out, I didn't blame Joseph Woll for the loss tonight. I had people messaging me, said, oh, he should have stopped that. He should have. 1 goal went in off of Benoit's stick. 1 goal went in off Morgan Rielly. There was a blown defensive coverage. The Brandon Carlo almost knocks in the puck with a broken stick. I mean, and the overtime goal was sort of a long shot that deflected. So, I mean, Joseph Woll shouldn't have a crisis of confidence here going into game 4, but we just have to understand and observe whether this team can sort of get it back together and get back to the team that won the first 2 games.
Hey, Katie, what do you think about the momentum in this series? Has it shifted in any one direction, or could it really go either way?
Yeah, well, first I got to give a shout out to one of the comments that we just had, which was, "Can we file a restraining order against Marchand asking for a fan base?" And I think I just saw a tweet from Elliot Friedman that I want to say it was it 12 goals and 21 assists in 31 playoff games versus Toronto that Brad Marchand is now up to. So not all of those were obviously with Florida. In fact, he's just now starting to do his damage as a Panther. But there's a little bit of history there, and I wonder if that adds to like the PTSD of this moment where it's like, okay, well, they're not playing Boston, but Marchand is here. So you still have to be scared. You still have to be a little wary. But for me, listen, and we saw this a little bit, I think, in the first round series between Ottawa. And again, I think Ottawa was just getting their feet wet. I certainly don't think that was necessarily a series that we really should have been too concerned about the Leafs finding a way to come through. Credit to the Senators for making it interesting. But we started to see the first impacts of the Craig Berube effect. And it's something that we've talked about all season long, right? What he brings that's been different than anything else the Leafs have had, right? Because there's all the conversations of the core four and how that hasn't changed. Well, Craig Berube has changed, and he has changed this team, the way they play, the type of style, but also the confidence that he has and his calming effect. I think that's something that, maybe is going to become more and more of a factor. And now with Florida making this series more interesting as opposed to a 3-0 lead, I don't think Florida was ever a team that anyone expected to, roll over and die. So even if this had been 3-0 Toronto heading into game 4, I would say buckle up because you really just don't know what you're going to get with the Florida Panthers. So, maybe having this game be closer is an earlier wake up call for Toronto to be able to realize, like, this is a team you really have to be ready for. If you want to take this home, you have a great opportunity to do that if you can get one of these wins on the road. Because as we've talked about with the cliche, it really isn't interesting until a road team wins a game. So Toronto has a great opportunity in game 4, but I think this is the opportunity for Craig Berube's hockey to really shine, for his influence on this team to shine. We've started to see that, I think, throughout the postseason. And I think that's kind of what we're going to be getting a lot of in game 4. So I'll be interested to see what the Leafs come out with, because again, I think Florida has some players who are battling some things, right? We've talked about this. They played a lot of hockey. There's definitely guys who aren't fully healthy, but they have home ice advantage. They thrive on that. Does this first win spark something in them? It's going to be up to Toronto to really dictate where this series goes in that game 4.
Absolutely. And I think we can all agree game 4 on Sunday going to be huge for both of these teams in determining sort of how the rest of this series plays out. Again, if you are just joining us, we are coming towards the end of our discussion here on the Hockey News Playoff Frenzy Live. Emma Lingen, Katie Gauze, Mike Agello, we are talking about the Florida Panthers overtime win over the Toronto Maple Leafs in game 3. So the Leafs still have a 2-1 series lead, and they are going to game 4 on Sunday. But looking around the rest of the league, of course, we've got Winnipeg with that commanding 3-0 lead over the Dallas Stars right now in the second period of game 2. Again, as we discussed, all you need is a Mikko Rantanen hat trick to make that a little interesting. So maybe we will see that. Maybe we won't. Have to stay tuned on that. But elsewhere in the league, of course, last night, we were here talking about Washington evening their series with Carolina. That's tied 1-1. And then the Edmonton Oilers took a 2-0 series lead over the Vegas Golden Knights. And I mean, this Edmonton team, they won't go away. And it sounds crazy to say this about a team that has Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid on it, but it really just, does it feel like these teams or this team has no business being up 2-0 over the Vegas Golden Knights right now? I think primarily from a defensive standpoint, it just doesn't make sense to me.
Yes.
Especially when you consider the way that the Golden Knights play at home and how that really is their domain and they truly dominate home ice. So there's that factor that's interesting. Last night's game was also unique because in the first one, you saw Vegas just fully blowing the lead. Last night, actually, Edmonton blew it. They got to the point where it was tied up 4-4. Vegas made the comeback. And of course, overtime, McDavid to Draisaitl, there's your game winner. So there's your series. And I mean, again, Cal Pickard, good for him coming in, being good enough to get them the win. Again, we talked about this with Bobrovsky, right? But like, this is a situation where you don't need this goalie to be outstanding when you have the offensive abilities that Edmonton does with Draisaitl and McDavid. It's just hard for me to wrap my head around the idea of, with Edmonton looking solid and playing the way they are, going as far as they could because of Cal Pickard. It's nothing against him. It's just like you feel like eventually this magical, storyline is going to end. Maybe that's not the case. Maybe he just has to continue to be just good enough, and Edmonton can get it done in front of him. It's certainly interesting, though. With Vegas going down 2-0 in the series, like, is Edmonton just going to run away with this thing? I would be shocked by that because I think a lot of us had Vegas winning this series, if not the series going a little longer than it looks like it could at this stage.
Well, although Edmonton's up 2-0 and they're full marks for that, winning in Vegas is not easy in the playoffs. I don't count Vegas out of the series because Edmonton's defense is still decimated. They're playing offensive hockey. Cal Pickard, I mean, I put the blame for that game last night on Adin Hill. Adin Hill got out goaltended by Calvin Pickard. There were a couple goals that Adin Hill really dropped the ball on. And now, of course, he's got the best insurance in the world of not being pulled. Ilya Samsonov is his backup. So that's not happening. He's got to play like the Adin Hill who won a Stanley Cup. And, you saw the difference that Pietrangelo made getting back in the lineup, scoring a goal. The ex-Buffalo Sabres scored 6 points in that game, and they tossed that down the drain. But I don't put it past Vegas to be able to rally and win Game 3, and then if they win Game 3, then it could be like this Florida Toronto series where maybe Edmonton starts to realize, okay, well, we got Calvin Pickard in goal, and our defense isn't very good. Maybe reality has maybe the Cinderella has awakened and a pumpkin has appeared.
All the metaphors. Yes, I think we've got a comment here. Knights are built for battle. Bring the armor, bring the fire. So I think that this is a team that knows how to double down, and they know, it's not a team that, like you said earlier, Katie, they're not just going to roll over and just kind of submit to the Oilers. So I think that this will be an interesting series, although we can all agree the 2-0 Oilers lead is a bit of a surprise. One last thing I want to talk about here before we wrap up tonight on that game between the Oilers and the Golden Knights last night. We learned today that Nick Waugh was fined the maximum amount, just over $7,800 maximum allowed under the CBA for cross-checking against Trent Frederick. In OT, of course, Waugh was given a major penalty and a game misconduct for that. Mike, I'm going to go to you because I know that you in particular have had some very passionate beliefs about the officiating in these playoffs. And so I wanted to start with you first. And I want to see, first of all, what do you think of the call in the game? What do you think of the punishment? Is it fitting of the crime?
Who, me? Yeah, the officiating in these playoffs have been trash. I think it's been terrible. It's been inconsistent. I didn't have a problem with the five in the game, but if it was serious enough to give him a major and a game misconduct in an overtime, then it should be a suspension. So I mean, I don't get. It's almost like, okay, we've penalized him enough. Let's penalize him $5,000, which is a drop in the bucket, or whatever the maximum fine is.
It was 7,812.50, which is
Yeah.
so random.
I thought the maximum during the regular
and not a penny more. Okay.
and that's the weird thing, because I think during the regular season the max is $5,000. So they must they're boosting it up in the postseason.
I think it was because he had the hearing, but ended up with the fine. So it's 5K is the max if you don't have a hearing. If you have a hearing, then I guess you can be fined random amounts, including 50 cents.
And that extra $2,812.50.
Yeah. So there you go.
Yeah, but no, I don't have a problem with the major. I do have a problem with it not being a suspension. There have been hits in this playoff. I'm in the minority. I think Tom Wilson should have been suspended for the hit on Carrier in the Montreal series. I think Sam Bennett should have been suspended at least a game for Anthony Stolarz. I'm in the minority. Everybody's like, "Oh, that's a hockey play." Baloney. It's not a hockey play. If a guy's puking on the bench, that's something he should have been suspended for. The guy's concussed. He may not play in the series, but no, it may have been the shot. It wasn't the elbow. It wasn't the chicken wing to the head of Anthony Stolarz. It was the shot in the first period. Yeah. Right.
But
Katie looks like she's got something to say here.
It's just I feel like in certain situations, context is important. And listen, I know that these guys are all battling and I know that it's intense, but Sam Bennett and Anthony Stolarz are boys. They are buds. And when you watch that play back, it really does look like a guy who's playing Sam Bennett hockey. He's driving the net, gets the back of the glove / forearm, not the elbow, when you really zoom in on it, but it's happening so fast and it's so hard to say. Listen, what happened with him throwing up and getting sick and obviously having to go to the hospital is terrible. But having spoke to a few Panthers people, and again, I know they're biased too, but just knowing the relationship between these two players. I mean, you heard Bennett when he addressed it in the media, talking about how he immediately reached out to Stoli. Like, he's like, I felt terrible. I wanted to make sure he was okay. At the same time, I get it. Like, I know that these players can kind of just put blinders on and they just go, like they just go. They're in playoff hockey mode and they don't think about who's on the other side of the ice. They don't think about the fact that they won a cup with that goalie and that goalie is their friend. I think the only thing I've learned from this is that you can't criticize the officials because you're never going to be right. You're never going to be wrong. You're never going to make everyone happy. So I'm at that point where I'm just like, I'm going to shut my mouth and let them do what they're going to do because I don't know what they're going to do anymore. There is no rhyme or reason. I can't predict it. I don't understand it, but I'm not going to criticize because I do feel like officials have the hardest job in the world, and I'll just leave it at that.
Well, it's impossible for me to shut my mouth, and all I can say is, if he does that to a friend, what would he do to somebody he doesn't like?
You better watch out, Mike. You're saying all this. He's coming for
I'm
you.
leaving.
Yeah, get out of here.
Well, did not mean to open up this can of worms so late in the show, so late in the evening after an overtime game, but always a fun time here with you guys on the Hockey News Playoff Frenzy Live. That is going to do it for tonight, however. Thank you to all of our viewers who have tuned in, sent us your comments, your questions. We love hearing from you guys. As a reminder, we are here every night during the playoffs. So we'll be back here tomorrow night covering the game of the night. And once again, we are brought to you by our good friends at Stix.com. Keep sending in those comments because you could have a chance to win some free swag from Stix.com. So make sure you keep tuning in every night during the playoffs. For Katie Gauze and Mike Agello, I am Emma Lingen. Thank you for watching us tonight, and we will see you tomorrow.